In the build-up to Splatoon 3's first major update after launch, I was following the hype train just like so many other people were. The new weapons looked super creative, the new kits would add some much needed variety to some of the existing weapons, and the return of Flounder Heights was imminent. However, on November 18th, 2022, all of that hype was overshadowed by the return of a great, looming evil. Ever since the very beginnings of Salmon Run with the launch of Splatoon 2, this constant thorn in my side has continued to plague me. Marooner's Bay is not only my least favorite Salmon Run stage, but it actively deters me from playing the mode whenever it's in rotation due to just how poorly designed the stage is, at least in my opinion. I'm Kit the Goddess, and since you all seem to like my Splatoon content so much, I thought I'd circle back around briefly and make this video to fill the gap while I work on my next review. Also, sorry if my voice sounds a bit strange, I'm just getting over a cold that, of course, decided to strike as soon as I came home from my summer job. Yay! As we get into this, please keep in mind that this is my opinion only, and I am by no means the end-all be-all of Splatoon opinions. If you like Marooner's Bay, hey, that's great. I'm just trying to explain here why I personally loathe the stage so much. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it. Think back to when Splatoon was revealed for the very first time. That original trailer from way back in 2014. One of the very first mechanics ever revealed for the series was the ability to swim in the very same ink you shoot. Not only that, but if you shoot it onto walls, you can swim straight up the side, allowing for some really creative verticality in the map design. Flounder Heights, like I mentioned earlier, is a prime example of this, featuring almost no uninkable walls while maintaining a high level of verticality within the stage itself. Moray Towers and Sturgeon Shipyard are also great examples of this. And while there's definitely a discussion to be had about this verticality being lost in the 4v4 map design as the series has gone on, right now we're focused on the Salmon Run stages. And for the most part, the Salmon Run maps have had a decent balance of vertically designed stages, horizontal ones, and hybrids of the two. Spawning Grounds, Gonefish and Hydroplant, and Sockeye Station strike a great midpoint. Ruins of Arc Polaris is a prime example of how to do a vertical Salmon Run stage well, with Gym and Salmon Junction, Salmon and Smokeyard, and Lost Outpost more focused on being horizontal. However, the only Salmon Run stage that actively frustrates me to the point of not wanting to play the mode at all is Marooner's Bay. And that's because it tries to be a vertical stage without any of the aspects that make vertical stages actually fun. For those unfamiliar, Marooner's Bay was the second Salmon Run stage to ever be released, releasing alongside the debut stage Spawning Grounds when Splatoon 2 first released. And even back then, it exhibited all of the same traits that I hate about it now that it's been added to Splatoon 3. The stage's high tide variant has the only playable area as a large, central boat, and when the tide falls, more land around the boat is exposed. One of the stage's key flaws is the placement of its egg basket. See, in almost every other Salmon Run stage, the egg basket is placed in some kind of central, easily accessible location, with multiple routes leading back up to it. However, the basket here is placed on the furthest back end of the ship, with salmonids spawning up from the opposite end of the stage and making their way up toward the basket. This, combined with how narrow the ship is, means the salmonids will always be coming toward the basket, with no other route that they could be lured to during high tide, since the boat is the only part of the map not submerged then. Usually other Salmon Run stages have a wider area around the egg basket and multiple routes you can maneuver around, letting you attempt to lure the salmonids away from the more crowded areas. But since all this stage has at the higher levels is these two almost completely straight routes leading straight back to the egg basket, with nothing around them except water that instantly splats you, if your team gets overwhelmed by too many salmonids to handle, it's much harder to make a comeback. But that's not even the biggest issue with this stage. Even when there's more room beneath the boat for you to maneuver around, the fact that the walls of the boat are almost entirely uninkable ruins what might have otherwise been a decent low-tide variant of the map. As I mentioned earlier, verticality is a key aspect of map design in Splatoon, and that goes for the Salmon Run stages as well. The vertical sections of both Sockeye Station and Spawning Grounds feature inkable walls, and even though Ruins of Arc Polaris does feature a lot of ink-proof walls, there are still sections you're able to swim up, which are placed strategically enough for the players to be able to use them in a pinch, while also not giving them too big of an advantage. And since the salmonids can't hurt you on the walls, so long as you're moving quickly, it provides you a really nice emergency escape route in exchange for abandoning the area you'd been holding down. Apparently though, the stage designers didn't realize how important this was when they were designing Marooner's Bay, because none of the walls on the boat directly in the center of the map are inkable. The only ways to get to the basket, positioned on one end of the boat, are to swim all the way around to the far end, in prime salmonid spawning territory and loop up around, or use these propellevators on the side, which require you to constantly fire ink into them to lift you. And you'd think the propellevators would be a good solution, but the problem is the platforms are so small that if a salmonid manages to follow you onto it, you're probably either going to get knocked off while you're shooting at the propeller, or you're going to let the platform fall and put yourself at even greater risk of getting swarmed. If you and a teammate are working together, one can shoot at the propeller while the other inks the side of the platform it raises, then swims up it, but this just leaves half of your team getting pulled away from the main objective just to get a safe route back to the basket. The fact that the walls of the boat are uninkable also raises another major issue: separation from your teammates. Most Salmon Run maps, even in their high tide variations, have branching routes that connect in various ways, allowing for teammates to split up and handle objectives in different areas, while still mostly being able to rush to the others in an emergency. But thanks to the giant difficult to traverse set piece in the middle of the stage, if your team decides to split up during low tide, you're pretty much screwed right out the gate. Let's say your teammate, let's call him Tim, rushes over to this part of the map to take out a stinger on the dock platforms, which, by the way, are one of the biggest death traps on this map, and you go over to the right side to deal with a big shot that set up its cannon on the eastern shore. Poor, unlucky Tim gets pushed off the edge as too many salmonids follow him down to the end of the dock, and he's splatted. Your other teammates are too busy dealing with the salmonids that made it onto the boat to help revive him, so it's up to you. Unfortunately, the only ways to get over there are to use the propellevator to get up onto the boat and cross over, which is a bad solution for reasons we've already discussed, go all the way around the boat, risking getting splatted and losing a lot of precious time, or take this extremely thin route beneath the center of the boat, which at this point is likely swarming with the same salmonids that splatted poor Tim, and will only get more crowded as the salmonids you were dealing with on your side follow you in, almost certainly splatting you. Now let's just say that the propellevator section was replaced with, oh, I don't know, just a simple inkable wall, perhaps? Then you wouldn't have to worry about constantly shooting at the propeller to make the platform rise, or about salmonids following you up onto the boat. All you'd have to do is ink the wall and swim up it. Then you could just swim safely across past the egg basket and either jump down to revive Tim yourself, or better yet, throw a bomb down to do that job while you and your other teammates clear the boat area. Such a simple change to the stage design would have had such a significant positive impact, yet for some reason the developers insist on pushing as many uninkable walls into as many of the stages as they can, particularly in Splatoon 3. I'm not sure what happened, but it really seems like the devs forgot that swimming up walls is one of Splatoon's core mechanics. Even the Shoreline version of this map has significant issues, mostly thanks to how thin the 3 strips of land are. Of course, most Shoreline variants have a similar 3-pronged approach to their design, with 3 separate stretches of traversable terrain surrounded by water from which the salmonids spawn. In most stages, this design philosophy works fine, but particularly on this stage, these 3 lanes are so thin that if salmonids simply start spawning and heading down that route, it's almost impossible for you to get around them. This becomes a major issue when you consider that 2 of these routes are actually connected by a similarly thin route at their ends. This is also typically where long-range bosses like stingers and big shots like to spawn, and the distance is much too far for most weapons to reach, meaning your only option to take out these major threats is to fight your way directly through the salmonids on these lanes, and put yourself at severe risk of being splatted. And don't even get me started about the night modes on this stage, like how during the giant tornado you're forced to have pixel-perfect accuracy when throwing your eggs onto the ship, or take the significantly slower propellevator route. Glowflies is almost a guaranteed death sentence here too, with no walls tall enough for the person being swarmed to hide while their teammates splat the salmonids. Suffice it to say, Marooner's Bay is a significantly flawed stage at best, and just plain grating at worst. Thankfully, with the newer Salmon Run maps, they seem to have been going in the right direction in terms of design, but it still baffles me that of all the older stages they could have brought back from Splatoon 2, they chose Marooner's Bay. That's about all I have to say on this, but don't go quite yet. I have a special announcement for those of you who made it to the end of today's video. I'm proud to announce that my channel's official Discord server and Patreon page are now both live. Join the Discord to hang out and chat with me and other viewers of the channel, and if you decide to give to my Patreon, you'll gain access to some special features like getting your name in the credits, special sneak peeks and early access to some of my future projects, and eventually some patron-exclusive streams and game nights once we have enough people, so be sure to check them out. Of course, as usual, liking, subscribing, and commenting helps out a ton as well, especially now that I'm getting back into the full swing of video production now that my summer job is over. Thank you all so much for tuning in, have a lovely rest of your day, and stay fresh.